Hey everybody. So today I want to talk about different ways that we can use our metronome. Now a metronome is the kind of thing that you probably all have and you probably all use it regularly. But some of you might feel like you're at a place with your metronome use where you've been using it for years, but it's been a long time since you felt any sense of growth or any real change in your sense of time or your understanding of rhythm and subdivisions, or your ability to play these things really cleanly and precisely and accurately. You may feel like your rhythmic growth has kind of stagnated over the last few years, despite the fact that you've maybe been using a metronome every single day. During that time, you might feel like there's been a bit of a plateau in your growth. And I think that the reason why this tends to happen is because we tend to use our metronome in exactly the same way every time, and we don't really give a lot of thought to it. So it's the sort of thing where we can just put it on, we play along with it, but we don't actually have to engage in it very actively. It's something that we can do sort of very naturally. It's almost second nature to us. We don't have to think much about it. And as soon as something gets to that place where it's second nature, then we're not really in a place where we're challenging ourselves anymore. And if we're not being challenged anymore, then we're not really growing. We're not pushing ourselves to really expand our abilities. So what I want to do today is I want to talk about different ways that we can use a metronome that force you to really consider your metronome, and that force you into a position where you can no longer take it for granted and do it the way that you've always been doing it, but that force you to really bring your attention back to it in a new way. And in doing that, it's going to restart that learning process and restart the feeling of productivity with metronome use. It's going to feel like you're getting somewhere, and you're going to feel a sense of growth that you might not have felt for a couple of years now. So in order to do that, we kind of need to rethink what it is that a metronome does for us. So a lot of people think that the metronome is something you just turn on and it's designed to give you the beats. Like you set it to a tempo and it clicks whatever the beat is in that particular music. So if you're in 4/4 time, the metronome will give you the quarter notes, it'll give you all of the beats, and you just play along with it. And that is one thing that it can do, but from a strictly objective sense, all the metronome does is it divides time evenly. It gives evenly spaced clicks in time. The fact that we hear that as beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, and beat 4 is something that we apply to it. It's something that we bring to the table. The metronome objectively just ticks. It doesn't have any sense of where it is in time, whether it's on beat 1 or beat 2. It's just objectively clicks. So we've applied this sense of it's beat 1, it's beat 2, it's beat 3, and it's beat 4. And since we've applied that in the first place, then we can also apply different importance to where the metronome is. So we can set the metronome and conceive of it in a different way other than just being on the beat. So today I'm going to go through different ways that we can sort of place the metronome, different ways that we can think of the metronome as subdividing the time in a way that's really going to force us to think about time in a different way. To do that, I'm going to be using two exercises from the Dots and Beams Rhythm Only collection. They're both from book 1 of the Rhythm Only collection. You can use anything from book 2 as well, or from the Pitch and Rhythm series if you like, or you can do this with any of the music that you're working on in your own practice. Because anything that has rhythm to it, which is almost all music that you'll be practicing, will be applicable to these exercises. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to just play through the two exercises so that you can hear them, and I'm going to use the metronome in that standard way that I was talking about, that you've probably all been using a metronome for years. That is, in the 4/4 exercise, the metronome is going to give the quarter notes, and in the 6/8 exercise, the metronome is going to give the dotted quarter notes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And this is something that's going to be very familiar to all of you, I'm sure. 1, 2, 3, 4. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so that was probably very familiar to everybody. One thing that I didn't mention earlier is the metronome that I'm using. So I'm using a metronome that's very simple. I'm not using a metronome with a bunch of different features. I'm not using one that gives a higher click for the downbeat and lower clicks for the other beats. I'm not using a metronome that gives all of the subdivisions at different dynamic levels or anything like that. It's just a straight, flat click sound. And the reason that I'm doing that is because I want as much of the responsibility for keeping track of the downbeat and keeping track of the subdivisions and all of that. I want as much of that responsibility to be on me as possible and as little of it to be on the metronome as possible. That helps to really pull the engagement toward the metronome rather than letting it become second nature like it has been in the past. Another thing is I'm using a cell phone metronome. I'm using an app rather than an analog metronome like this one. And the reason I'm doing that is because some of these exercises require tempos that are slower than these analog metronomes can produce. These tend to bottom out at 40 beats per minute. It tends to be the lowest speed. And some of these exercises require me to go down as low as 20 beats per minute, which you'll see in a few minutes. Okay, so the next exercise that I'm going to do is another one that you've probably all done before, and that's where I'm taking the tempo, I'm cutting it in half, and I'm letting the metronome represent, instead of the quarter note, the half note. So now there's twice as much time between beats and twice as much music happening between beats. And again, like I was saying earlier, this is an exercise in taking more of the responsibility for keeping track of the time off of the metronome and putting that onto me as the player. Again, this is probably one that you've all done. So here's the 4/4 exercise in that format. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, yeah, so that same method can be done now again. So where we took the tempo and cut it in half to make it represent the half note instead of the quarter note, now we're going to cut it in half again. We're going to go down to 20 beats per minute, and now each click of the metronome is going to represent a whole note, so it's going to represent the whole bar. We're also going to do this time in the 6/8 exercise, where we're going to go, instead of 60 beats per minute to the dotted quarter, we're going to cut it down to 30 beats per minute, and that's also going to represent the downbeat of each bar. So now you're going to hear the 4/4 exercise and the 6/8 exercise with one click per bar on each downbeat. And these are the exercises where we need to go from this analog metronome to a cell phone app, because these metronomes don't go slowly enough to allow for these slow tempos. And when we start to get to these really slow tempos, now you really feel the responsibility for the time come off of the metronome and land on you. Now the metronome is just an occasional reminder of whether or not you're rushing or dragging with the tempo. And it can be a real challenge. So this is a really fun one. So here's how that sounds. 1, 2, 3, 4. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so this can be expanded out indefinitely. I mean, obviously, eventually it gets a little bit ridiculous. You'll end up at 5 beats per minute, and you'll have one metronome click every 12 seconds or something. But depending on your time signature and the tempo that's written, like maybe you're in 3/8 time, and it's a fairly fast tempo, you might be able to bump the tempo back and fit 4 bars in between clicks or something like that. So this, you can expand this out as much as it's reasonable to do so. So the next thing I want to talk about is where the click falls relative to the beat. So in all of the exercises we've done so far, the metronome has always been landing on the beat. It might be landing on all of the beats, or on beat 1 and 3, or on just beat 1, but they're always landing on the beat. So the next exercise is we're going to take the metronome and place it on the off beats. So in simple time, we're going to put it on the and of the beat. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and here's where the difference falls with compound meters, because each main beat is subdivided into 3 eighth notes. We have 2 additional places where we can place it. We can put the metronome on the second of the group of 3 or on the third eighth note of the group of 3. So we could have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those are, totally valid ways to practice with this metronome technique. So here's what that sounds like with the metronome on offbeats in simple meter and on the second eighth note or third eighth note of each group in compound meters. 1, 2, 3, 4. One, two, three, four, five, six. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so now let's take that to the next level. Instead of eighth note offbeats, we're going to put it on all the 16th note offbeats. So now we'll put the metronome in 4/4 time on the second 16th note of the beat. So 1, 2, 3, 4, or the last 16th note. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3, 4. And in 6/8 time, in compound meter, we'll put it on the second, fourth, or sixth 16th note in the group. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for the second 16th note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for the fourth, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for the sixth 16th note. So here's how all of those combinations sound. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, Okay, so these 8th note and 16th note offbeat exercises are a really great way to practice playing really syncopated music really accurately and really precisely. So if you play a lot of music like that, then it's a really good way to develop those chops. Another thing that we can do with this offsetting method is we can apply it to the previous exercises that we were working on. So where we had the metronome representing the half note, for example, in 4/4 time, it was playing on beats 1 and 3. Now we can shift that so the metronome's playing on beats 2 and 4. Or in the whole note exercise where the metronome was playing on all of the downbeats, we can now shift that so the metronome plays on all of the beat 2s or all of the beat 3s or beat 4s. Or we can get even more fine with that. We can shift it so the metronome plays like all of the ands of beat 1, or the and of 2 and the and of 4, or the last 16th note of every bar, or the last 16th note of beat 2 and the last 16th note of beat 4, or that sort of thing. So once we start to sort of cross-reference and multiply these exercises together, the possibilities get pretty endless, and the challenge can get very high. So I'm not going to demonstrate all of them. I'll let you explore those, but I will demonstrate the metronome on beats 2 and 4 rather than 1 and 3, which is what you saw earlier. So here's what that one looks like. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so this next set of exercises involves another shift in thinking. So all of the exercises that we've done so far have had the metronome falling in a regular place, either relative to the beat or relative to the bar. So they were always falling on the beat, or always falling on the offbeat, or always falling on beats 2 and 4, and that sort of thing. But what happens if we take the metronome and have it represent a grouping of subdivisions that doesn't correspond with the way those subdivisions are grouped within the music? So let's say we're in 4/4 time, which is a simple meter. The 8th notes in a simple meter are grouped in pairs, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. They're always in groups of 2. What if we set the metronome to a dotted quarter note to represent a group of 3 8th notes and have that play over these groupings of 2? So now it sounds like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Now, from click to click, the metronome is actually alternating on the beat, off the beat, on the beat, off the beat. We no longer have that same consistency of it's always on the beat or it's always off the beat. In addition, from bar to bar, now it's shifting, because this is now a 3-bar cycle before it repeats. So what I mean by that is the click isn't always going to land on beat 1. In fact, it's only going to land on beat 1 of every 3rd bar. So the other 2 bars between are going to be different than the first bar in terms of how the metronome relates to the beats within that bar. Let's hear that again. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So now we've got this sort of metronome that floats over the top of what we're playing, but we're still trying to play in 4/4 time. And an important part about this is that we still want to be phrasing this as if it's in 4/4 time. We don't want to lose the musicality of the phrase itself, but we want to still be lined up with this metronome that's giving something that's not especially helpful in sort of shaping that phrase. So there's a real challenge there. We can also reverse this. So if we go into compound meter, if we go into 6/8 time, the 8th notes in compound meter are grouped in 3s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now we can set the metronome to represent the quarter note, or every second 8th note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. So with this one, we don't have the challenge of the 3-bar cycle, because with this one, the metronome lands on all of the downbeats. But we still have the challenge of having to phrase it in 6/8 rather than phrasing it in 3/4. And because 3/4 is such a common thing for us to play and for us to think in, this one, I think, presents more of a challenge than the 4/4 one did, because there's going to be the tendency to want to play along with the metronome and phrase it in groups of 2 8th notes rather than groups of 3 8th notes. So there's a real challenge there. So here's a demonstration of what those sound like. The 4/4 exercise with the metronome playing the dotted quarter notes, and the 6/8 exercise with the metronome playing the quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. One, two, three, four, five, six. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So just like the previous exercises, these ones can be varied by changing the size of the subdivision that we're using. So in that last exercise you heard the metronome representing the dotted quarter note in 4/4 time. Now we're going to do it with the metronome representing the dotted eighth note, or every 3/16 notes rather than every 3/8 notes. So that'll sound like 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Just like before, this is going to make a 3-bar phrase before it realigns and restarts. But this time, instead of going on the beat, off the beat, we're going on the beat, last 16th note, off beat, second 16th note, then back on the beat. And that's going to cycle through over the course of 3 bars. We can also do the dotted half note. So now it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So every 3/4 notes. So that's another way we can do it. We can flip this again back to compound meter, and we can go, instead of every quarter note, every half note. So now it's giving every 4/8 notes in a time signature that groups them in threes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1. Now we're getting into the multi-bar phrases. This is a 2-bar phrase rather than a 1-bar phrase before it realigns on the downbeat. So here's how those 3 exercises are going to sound. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I think you get the point with all of this. Feel free when you're doing this to experiment with different ways of combining these exercises with each other and with different time signatures, different groupings of subdivisions and that sort of thing. Once you get into it, the possibilities are really quite endless. One thing that I didn't mention is that you can also set your metronome to polyrhythmic relationships relative to the beat. So maybe set your metronome to like the quarter note triplet in 4/4 time. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you have the sort of polyrhythmic clash of the 16th notes in your exercise clashing with the triplet subdivisions in your metronome. That can be another way to really bump the challenge if you're looking for that. I'm not going to demonstrate that. I already feel like this is going to be a really long video. And I feel like what I've given is quite a lot to digest already. So thanks for watching. If you want any of these exercises, you can find them on dotsandbeams.com. This is the Rhythm Only Book 1. But the Rhythm Only book 2 and both of the pitch and rhythm books are great tools for this kind of work as well. You can also do it with the music that you're practicing already. I'm going to leave you with one more demonstration, and that'll be the 4/4 exercise with the metronome representing every 5th 16th note. So this time it's going to create a 5-bar phrase, and just like the dotted 8th note version, the metronome is going to be ticking, alternating between on the beat, 2nd 16th note, off beat, last 16th note. So it's going to alternate through all of the different placements relative to the beat, on a 16th note subdivision level. So yeah, I'll leave you with that. Thanks again for watching, and hopefully I'll see you guys again soon. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.